Hope everyone's doing well. Back here again to talk about real estate strategies and expansions. We're going to talk today about successful businesses, how they scale their model, how they go into new markets, how they go into new states, what those expansion strategies look like, and some of the data points and some of the different methodologies that a real estate partner like Oxford Partners would utilize to help guide them in that decision making.
And like along those lines, one of my favorite chapters in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is to start with the end in mind. And that's what we try to do here at Oxford Partners. So a lot of agents will just ask you where you want to go, what's your budget, basic kind of ABC real estate questions. We really like to start opening up that next location, thinking in terms of like, why are you expanding? What are the business objectives at hand that is leading you to want to open up multiple other locations in different markets and different states? And so the first thing we like to ask is, why are we expanding? Are we focused on revenue growth, access to labor? Are we optimizing our supply chain? Are we looking to reduce costs? Are we trying to locate near our clients, closer proximity to clients, that kind of thing? And then operationally, like, why are we scaling? Is it a hub and spoke model, regional distribution? Are we setting up a headquarters and then we just want a bunch of small satellite locations or more regional hubs? So we like to think in terms of that end in mind, and then we'll work backwards to arrive at the real estate fundamentals. And so for corporate, office, and industrial users, these type of answers are typically tied to what their workforce strategy might be, proximity to customers or ports, or some type of logistical model that they're solving for, or M&A activity, right? So we're buying a company, we're consolidating locations, so they tend to fall along those lines.
And one thing that we normally do when we're starting to work with a client is help them identify what metrics matter, right? Because there's hundreds, there's thousands of different things you could look at. And it's definitely a bit of overwhelming data and too much, and just where's the signal and the noise, right? And so what we would try and help them do is create a profile looking at their more successful locations. So
Right.
obviously, if they have more than one already, that really helps. But even if they've got one, we can use that as the metric and put together a profile and say, what does it look like to
Right.
be where you are now?
Right. And that's fun. Sometimes we'll have a client or prospective client that really understands what their success criteria is. And so they'll rattle off immediately. A lot of them don't know. And so the fastest way to get to that is like, all right, give us your top performing locations. Let us try to guesstimate, look at that, dig into the data and see if maybe there's fundamental similarities at those locations.
What's really fun is sometimes they think they know why it's successful. They think they have an idea, but when you look
Sorry.
in the data, it's not quite, it's not exactly what they thought it was. There's some nuance to it. And that's really interesting to find out. And so if you're an office user of space, some examples of things you might be looking at: your labor availability within the 10, 15, 20, 30-minute drive time. You could be looking at, from the demographic side of things, the educational attainment of people who live within a certain range. You could be looking at their wage bands. You could be looking at whether they own or rent. You could be looking at crime. You could be looking at transit access. And obviously, when the real estate perspective, you could be looking at Class A versus B, different types of submarkets. If it's a healthcare user, you could be looking at their spending and whether they're more private pay versus Medicaid. So there's lots of different things you could look at. On the office side, if it's an industrial, then proximity to important roadways. In certain manufacturing type markets, the ability of the roadways to handle certain weights is important, or hazardous materials, transit, travel times to major customers from wherever you're going. And obviously, if you're looking at coming from the airport versus coming from a port versus making cross border from, let's say, Mexico into Texas, that sort of thing, access to those freeways is important.
Right.
Labor can be a huge factor there as well. Access to power, zoning and regulations, there's a lot. It's really endless. But we would try and put this profile together, give them a really good, tight, several bullet point factors that we think they should be focusing on, things that we think were the keys to success where they are now, so we can go help replicate that.
Yeah, correct. And so when we do that, maybe an example of kind of what the output realization would be on a successful location, we would do that analysis and understand, okay, a successful location typically has over 300,000 working age people within a 30-minute drive of wherever you're setting up shop, of which 5% of that workforce is in the warehouse labor distribution workforce, and then of which the top 20% of wages that you'll have to pay is $28 per hour or less, right? And then we typically see better success in areas where there's less regulation and zoning requirements, and also maybe 4-hour drive from XYZ primary customer, right? And so it goes on, but those tend to be or can be way more critical to a location success than what's the price per square foot? What new market do we want to go to? So that's like what you do at the very end. Maybe there's 20 markets that we consider going to, and we find of those 20 markets, like 3 or 4 are ideal based off of that example success criteria. Then you go there, and it might make sense to spend a little bit more money on your real estate than you initially thought, just because the probability of success is going to be much higher. And with that in mind too, it's not only about which location we should go to, but also it's about how many locations per market or sub market could we set up and still have success, like a cannibalization rate, a saturation analysis, right? And so, Chase, we could go on and on for hours about the different data points that we could pull in. We don't want to do that, but an example of maybe the top 2 data points for office would just be, again, that workforce availability. So what's the depth of that labor pool in a certain area that you could recruit to? And then the availability of your target ideal client profile. So who's the end user? Who are you selling to? What's the density of them around that location? And then for industrial, a top 2 would be shipping volume potential. And there's a lot of logistical components that go into that. We can't expand on that right now. And then just delivery time modeling, ease of your logistics to and from locations, delivering to your end customer is a big one. So when you run through that analysis, you might have your top market, Atlanta, and then Dallas maybe is your top 2. And you could say Atlanta can support up to 3 facilities, but not 5 before we're cannibalizing ourselves. And then Dallas might have 5 locations, but not 7 for the same deal. And so
Right.
that's also important.
That's right. Yeah. So just using the data to help inform that decision, understand not only where to go with the market, but how many locations really can you support. Yeah. And so another factor that we've looked at is the labor pool, the customer density, the infrastructure, combining all of those different factors. And really the key takeaway is it's not just demographics look okay in this market or this sub market. The real estate cost looks good. Maybe it'll fit for whatever budget that we had in mind. Let's go for it. And then all else just gets dropped off, right? You really have to take a holistic view. And this might depend on, like you're saying, Ryan, if you're looking at 15 or 20 different states or large MSAs, you've got a really large amount of data to work through. You've got really disparate markets, a lot of different things you could factor in and make decisions on. But even at a local level where you're looking at a Houston or a Dallas or an Austin, and there's just a number of submarkets, this still comes into play where you really have to look at, are there other things here that industrial power capacity, the roadways and infrastructure, planned Department of Transportation roadway that, maybe under construction for the next 8 years, right? Labor force participation. There's lots of things that you could then factor in to help you choose one over the other rather than this market's a better price, so let's just go there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then ultimately, just to wrap this up, that's the Oxford workplace strategy. I heard something once that I loved, and it's a lesson just acting as an agent is you kill the deal early, right? So if you're working on something and you think it's going to be too difficult to make, or it's a square peg in a round hole, you kill the deal early. And we, as advisors, we're just not these old school agents that just find the building and just take orders. We really want to scrutinize what factors that are play that makes a successful real estate location, and then accelerate to killing the deal early. And it's not necessarily the deal, but for our clients, is let's only open up successful locations. Let's avoid wasting time, and let us help you really nail down what's going to make a successful location so we can just do more of those and continue to help you open up your second, third, fourth, fifth, 60th location. That's really how we differentiate ourselves from a lot of our competition.
It's about being a trusted real estate advisor, helping them along the way. The faster we can help them scale, the more successful they are, the more successful we are. So it's partnership.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.